Back in July, an old uni friend called Max reached out to me and asked me if he could interview me for his master's project, which of course I said yes to. It was about growing up with social media, and whilst we were only able to use about 20 seconds of our conversation in his project, which ended up being incredible, by the way, the world needs to hear it. So if he ends up giving me permission to link it below, please have a listen. He's incredible. So because we were only able to use about 20 seconds, he has been ever so kind and has given me permission to use the full uncut version for a podcast episode. I really enjoyed this. Max is such a great interviewer, and I think it would be really interesting for you guys to see me on the other side of the microphone, being the interviewee rather than the interviewer, and hearing some of my views. So without further ado, here is the episode. I really hope you enjoy, and thank you so much to Max for this amazing conversation that we had.
I was just thinking that's funny that I'm kind of turning the tables on you a little bit. And
Do you know what? I was thinking that I was like, it's really weird being on the other side, but I love it.
when the host becomes the questioned. So yeah, if we can just kind of set the ball rolling and just introduce yourself, talk a little bit about being there, done chat, talk about your kind of experience with coming and putting that together, please.
So I'm Garima Ojha, and like Max said, I've got a podcast called Been There, Done Chat, and the way that I've summarized it is self-improvement. So whether that's to do with well-being, I also interview people about their experiences in certain areas because I feel like even that hearing someone's story, it's kind of indirectly helping other people, which can then in turn help with your mental health as well. Yeah, I'm really big on self-improvement, well-being, everyone being the best version of themselves, self-love, all of that. So I've done a couple of solo episodes as well, which I've been told to try and do a little bit more of. I also know you through uni, so we went to Uni
Yes.
of Manchester together. We presented the SU awards, no, the SU election results, didn't
The
we?
SU election results, many it feels like a long time ago. I was going
It
to say
really
many years
does.
ago, but it kind of wasn't, was
You were
it?
so good. Yeah, no, it was good. You were really good. Everyone loved
Thank
you.
you.
So good. But yeah. But yeah, I actually started my podcast during university. I was in Fuse FM, Fuse TV, that society, and over there they had a podcasting studio. And I thought, you know what, I've always loved meeting with people. I've loved speaking. I've loved deep discussions. I think that's one of my hobbies in life is just having deep interactions with people. And I'm also a very open-minded person, so I love hearing different perspectives. So I thought, do you know what, let's grab this opportunity. I started my podcast there, and it's kind of carried on from there.
Brilliant. So if we kind of just start, one of the things that I'm exploring, as we kind of mentioned a bit earlier, is about what your experience initially might have been with growing up online. And obviously, you're part of the generation that I'm investigating, Generation Z. We are the most online generation that there's ever been, the digital natives, some people call us. So, what's your experience been of growing up with easy access to the internet and early access to social media? Has that been positive? Has that been negative? Has it been a bit of both?
I would say, I mean, I think during my early childhood, so childhood meaning up to about 12, 13, whatever, I think I was part of Generation Z where we kind of saw social media emerge. So I did grow up with a lot of my life without it. And so I've kind of seen the difference. So I can kind of give you a perspective on both sides. But growing up, I think I'm very grateful that there was no social media during childhood because I was able to, be outdoors, be present, be with nature, hang out with people in real life, and I've got beautiful memories. And then when it came to secondary school, that's when sort of Instagram and Snapchat was starting, and I was kind of a little bit late to the game. So I think everyone got Instagram in year eight, something like that, but I got it in year 10. And yeah, I kind of just saw everything move from outdoors to kind of online. And it's really crazy you asked me that because, sorry, no, it's really funny that you asked me that because I can't even remember what I would do after school, for example, when there wasn't social media because it's been such a it's I was literally saying this to my friend the other day is I can't remember what I was doing before TikTok. Like TikTok has only been a thing since COVID for me. And I can't remember what I was doing like before bed, the nighttime scroll, all of that. I can't remember, which is crazy. But I think to answer your question about if it was positive or negative, I'd say a bit of both. During my early teenagers, I would say a little bit negative, just in the sense that, it's a vulnerable time for everybody. You're going through puberty, and whether it's comparing yourself online, which thankfully I didn't have much of that, but mine was more about comparing people's lives. So, when they're going out having fun, doing all this traveling, and I kind of think, oh, but I'm in my room, but like, it's more of that, comparing your life with that, and FOMO as well. So that part was a bit negative. But I think as I've gotten older and matured a little bit, I understand that that is not real life. People show the best parts or what they want to show, and it's just very important to detach from that, appreciate it for what it is, but focus on you and know that it's not real life. But overall, I'd say positive, and that's just because I've made so many incredible close friends through that. Especially with my podcast, I'm able to sort of portray a nice message as well. So overall, I would say positive for me.
We're all positive, brilliant. I just lost a little bit of what you were saying during the bit that you said where you found it difficult. I just lost a little bit of the
Oh yeah,
audio and picture, and I
yeah.
got 90% of it, so don't worry about repeating everything. But
I
if you
can
could
repeat
just
if you
mention
want.
a little bit more about what bits you found difficult and a little bit about the kind of the FOMO aspect of things.
Yeah, so I think during teenage years, I spent quite a lot of time alone in my room. And so, I was on social media and I would see all these people doing all these things and traveling different places. And that part I found quite hard. I know some friends had issues with, comparing themselves online, and it is really difficult because, again, you don't know what's real, what's not real. But yeah, for me, it was mainly about FOMO and, oh my God, these people are doing all these things and I'm here in my room. And that quite hard. But after growing up, that kind of thing, and maturing, you know that that's not real life. Or maybe it is their real life, and you just have to focus on you and not compare yourself to other people in different ways, and just find love within yourself and learn to detach from that.
Yeah, absolutely. And obviously, you mentioned as well that it's obviously important to remember the positive aspects of social media and being able to be online.
Mm.
And that's something that I'll come on to perhaps in the second half of things as well. I also want to stick up on the fact that as we've developed and as kind of our generation has reached adulthood, we obviously were hit by the pandemic, which is a huge, momentous, significant point in history, but also it threw so many things online. And do you think that the increase in being online, um, how did that impact you? And was that a thing that you found difficult? And do you think that other people our age also found it difficult?
I mean, I think during a period of time like that, where we're all, locked indoors and we can't really see the normal people that we see day to day, I think in my case, I found that quite a positive experience just because without social media, I wouldn't have been able to speak to certain friends or whatever it was. So I found it less difficult, even with FaceTime and that kind of thing. So I'm trying to think how to answer that properly. Yeah, I think, yeah, overall, I'd say it was a positive experience for me and for lots of people that I know. Because again, like you can connect with people online and it's kind of a nice escapism from the world as well at that point. You can kind of distract yourself. And it was quite, oh yeah, one good thing about that was obviously TikTok emerged from, I mean, I know it was a thing before, but people started to download it during COVID. I was one of them. And it was actually really nice to see, different things that the world were doing and the fact that we were all in it together, the whole world. That was quite a comforting feeling. Because again, if you didn't have social media and you're just stuck with whoever, you were in quarantine with, you couldn't really, I feel like it would have been more lonely in a way. But knowing that everybody's going through the same thing, I think it was quite a good thing, in my opinion.
Do you think it also helped to give yourself an opportunity to form a bit of independence as well? Kind of as you have access to a bit more information, you have access to be able to form relationships online as well as in person. Do you think that that helped independence?
Yeah, I would say so in a way because I think when you are locked up essentially by yourself or with very few people, I think you do tend to obviously spend a lot of time alone. And within that time alone, I think, I mean, I recently made a podcast episode about it, but I think that everybody should spend a certain period of time alone in isolation. Obviously, that was too long, but certain bits of your life alone, just so you can figure out who you are and pour into yourself. And like you said, because we had access to social media, we can kind of be inspired by some creators, for example, and figure out some new hobbies. And I know lots of people have made careers through TikTok and social media. So I think spending time alone can kind of help you detach from the outside world, focus solely on you and figure out what your purpose is, what you want to do, whilst we're here on Earth or whatever it is. So I think to an extent, it was quite a good thing. Obviously, it was a very prolonged period, but for a chunk of it, I think it was all right.
Would you say that you felt more able to express yourself online or in person?
I would say in person is probably easier, just because when you're expressing yourself online, obviously you're just talking to a camera, right? When it's you, but that video is being exported to so many people, millions of people around the world. And obviously, you've got a comment section and people can comment whatever they want. So I think if you, it's really hard if you don't have that deep sense of self-love, just to know, it's just a comment. Like people can have their own opinions about me. But because of that and the little fear of judgment, and then you've got, digital footprints, whatever it is, that part can be a little bit hard to express yourself completely online because I think you've got more eyes on you and you're kind of a bit more conscious of what you're doing or saying. So I would actually say that I'm not 1000% myself online. I kind of show parts of me, but not the full picture, I'd say.
Yeah, absolutely. I think a lot of people will kind of relate to that and feel the same way about it. You've come to obviously a point in your life where you've matured and you've focused on putting together kind of social media content and podcast content that is about self-love and self-care. So you've obviously got that almost shield, if you like, where you're able to be a little bit more comfortable in your own skin. But what
Mhm.
sort of impact would you think it would have had on you if you'd been exposed to criticism online or comment sections if you were a little bit younger and you hadn't had that chance to kind of develop as a person?
Yeah, 100% it would have been a lot harder. I actually posted a very small TikTok video that went viral about last year or something, and I got several, nice comments, whatever it was, and I got one or two negative ones, and I remember feeling like a little pit in my stomach, and I just thought, oh, gosh. But then that went away after about 10 minutes because I said, you know what, it's their opinion. Like I'm not going to feel sad or happy about it, whatever. Everyone's got their own opinion. But like you said, I was thinking about this the other day, and I thought, had I had been an early teenager where I hadn't had, I love myself, all that kind of thing, but obviously when you're in that vulnerable period, things can hurt you a little bit more. So I don't think I would have taken it as easy as I did, for sure.
And so, does it worry you a little bit if you consider the fact that a lot of young people are going to have access to phones, social media, and the internet from a very young age now?
Yeah, it does. I think, especially like I said, during puberty, it's such a vulnerable time. You're figuring out yourself. um, that can be a little bit tricky with comments coming to you and things like that. Like I remember even in school, teachers telling me I wasn't good enough in a certain subject in secondary school. That would really get to me really, really badly. And so I'm thinking about my younger self then compared to now, where it wouldn't really affect me as much. I think it would have been really difficult. And I do worry for the younger generation. I think it's really hard because I'm very solution driven. So I kind of think what would kind of make that better, but it's so accessible that you can't really detach from it unless you literally switch off your phone and focus on the real life. But yeah, I think it's very important for young children to love themselves deeply inside to the point where any comment that people can make would just look like somebody saying, "Oh, it's a sunny day today." That's what I would want for everybody. Do you know what I mean? So yeah, it is difficult and I do worry.
And I think it is natural to worry as well,
Mhm.
particularly on issues like that. Obviously, they're very difficult because we know that social media and kind of we're very comfortable with social media as a generation. And I don't want to say for myself or on your behalf that we are kind of anti-social media because obviously you can use it as a brilliant tool as well, but it's just about finding that balance sometimes, isn't it?
I think maybe I was trying to think maybe one thing to kind of combat that is maybe in school teaching young people to not compare themselves to anybody, regardless if it's online or not, to pour into themselves, be the best, happiest version of themselves, love themselves deeply from the inside. And I think that can help a little bit with social media. And if I'm honest, a contrary argument to that is you've got so many self-love creators online. And I think it's very important for young teenagers to follow the right people. And what I mean by that is, I mean, it's up to them, but in terms of if maybe they have a lower self-esteem, follow influencers who are all about a deep self-love from the inside to become the best version of themselves and not compare themselves online. So that's kind of a contrary part, because if you're following the correct people. And I think another thing that I always tell people is, if they find that they're comparing themselves to people online, simply unfollow, block if you need to, just for your own mental health and sake. And then when you get to a point where you're not going to compare them, you can follow them again for, other stuff. So that's one thing I think, yeah, maybe in schools teach children a deep sense of self-love, parents as well. And then as well, follow the right people and unfollow the people who are not going to make you feel the best, I'd say.
Absolutely. And obviously you've mentioned people put content out online that promotes self-love and kind of having an awareness that the impact of what you're saying online could be reaching anybody, and it could be reaching young people. How do you use social media now yourself to promote a positive mental attitude for yourself and for other people?
I would say mainly through my podcasts and my TikToks. I try to make little TikToks about, I mean, I made a video about things that have improved my life, for example, and it's just where you've got a green screen behind you and you kind of show your notes up or whatever. So, and I want to make more videos like that, because I think self-love is number one. If you love yourself, then life is just more beautiful, right? Because you attract the like nicer people and whatever it is, healthier relationships, that kind of thing. And you just ultimately lead a more fulfilling life because you're putting yourself first. So you're not anyway. But yeah, so I'd say through those, and with my podcast, I like to, whenever I do have a guest on, I always ask them, how did you get this confident or whatever it is, and just to help other people, because a lot of the people that I have interviewed, they've not born with this level of confidence or this success or whatever it is. They've all started from either rock bottom or really difficult times. So I think I help people promote, I mean, I try to promote good mental health and all that stuff through sharing those journeys, as well as, like I said, through little TikToks and things about how, things have changed my life and how to love yourself deeply. Like, for example, my recent podcast episode was about showing yourself the 5 love languages, having a deep sense of love for yourself. And, that ultimately helps your mental health and well-being and all of that. But yeah, I'd say mainly through content like podcasts and TikToks. And I like to make little snippets as well from my podcast episodes, because some people don't like to watch long-winded things. So I make little snippets of key moments. And I've also got my timestamps as well on YouTube as well. People want to go to certain sections. So I try to make it as accessible as possible. Yeah, I'd say actually that's one thing, because podcast episodes can be quite long, right? They can be between, however long, but mine tend to be roughly 20 minutes to sometimes an hour and a half. And so people can look at that and find that quite overwhelming, right? It's an hour and a half of content. I don't have time for all of this, which is why I always make sure to put timestamps in. So I don't want people to feel pressured to watch the whole thing. They can just go to a certain bit. So maybe, this person's talking about 95% of the podcast, someone's not really interested in, but that 5% on self-love or on how they overcame this or whatever it is, they can go and watch that as well. So I try to make it as accessible as possible.
And obviously, if you've made sure that your content is accessible as possible, then it will naturally be as kind of digestible for the right people who need to hear it as well.
Yeah.
Definitely. And I'm looking at the last question that I've got written down, and it's a bit of a bombshell to drop on you. So
That's
no
all right.
no pressure if but what I wanted to know basically, do you feel kind of on the whole, do you feel a bit frustrated when there's this kind of narrative of social media is bad or dangerous or scary? Do you feel a bit frustrated? We'll take that as a first question, and then I'll break it on the second one. So yeah, do you feel a bit frustrated and a bit kind of that it's overly cynical to say that social media is a negative tool, because obviously you're proving that it can be used for positive purposes as well?
Um, I'd say so, because I think I understand the negative side, of course, but I think I am quite a big believer sometimes in self-accountability to an extent in certain situations. And what I mean by that is I try not to complain too much about things that can't be controlled. For example, we can't just ban social media and take it away. So I think it's very important to kind of I like to also look at the positives as well. So it does frustrate me a little bit because there's been so many positive changes with social media. Like people have, gotten jobs and it's allowed people to be more creative. And I've been very educated as well through social media. There's so many things I had no idea about until people tell us in social media, because I think in school as well, we're only taught certain things, and history is such a huge thing, right? You've got millions and millions of years of whatever, and we only get taught a certain bit. So I've learned so much through TikTok, things that don't really get shown on the news as well. We kind of learn through TikTok. So yeah, it does frustrate me because I personally, in my opinion, I think the positives outweigh the negatives. And if you do find negatives in social media, it's kind of try and find a way where you can diminish that. Like I said earlier, unfollow people that make you feel a certain way, or if you don't agree with someone, just focus on the people you do agree with. Do you know what I mean? Yeah,
Yeah,
it does. I would say it does frustrate me.
absolutely. And if you look at it, obviously, from a personal perspective and as a whole, do you think that Generation Z use social media positively or negatively?
I would say positively overall. That's a hard question. Give me a second.
No, that's all right, no problem. I knew it was a bit of a tough one on the end.
It's really hard because you've got so many different people, right? Even within Generation Z. Um,
If you want to come down in the middle, that's all right as well.
okay. Um, because one thing I don't know if I wanted to touch on is maybe cancel culture.
Can do, absolutely.
Okay, I would say a bit of both. I would say positively in the sense that, like I said, it's helped people express themselves, whether that's differing opinions or educating people on certain things or making people aware of certain things that have happened or are going on. Negative side, I would say, is when it can get quite intense in the sense that obviously cancel culture is something I don't really agree with, just because, I mean, unless you've done irrevocable harm, whatever. But I think when it comes to differing opinions, I've always been quite an open-minded person, and I free speech is kind of like it's like a topic where I believe that everybody should have free speech to an extent, because I think it allows for open discussion, right? I think if everyone's got the same opinion, we're not really, it kind of hides people's true self. So I think that the problem lies when it can be very intense in the sense that, no, we need to cancel this person because they've said this one thing or they've whatever. And in my thing, I think it can be quite tense and quite toxic as well, because I don't believe that we should just cancel someone off the face of the earth just for a differing opinion, in my opinion. I would say so that I think there's a line that overall I'd say positive for sure, but it can be quite toxic and intense when it's a certain thing like, this person said this one 20 years ago, we need to cancel them and send them loads of hate. It's the hate that gets me. That I would say is probably the worst. Like like before cancel culture is just the negative hate comments. You've got constructive criticism, and I'm very much, I love when people give me tough love and constructive criticism and advice and whatever it is, and I can take negative comments and whatever, but a lot of people can't, and that can be very damaging, because again, you're behind a screen, and I think I had Hums was on my podcast recently. He's an influencer, content creator, musician, and he said that he'd read in a book where as human beings we're designed to focus on the negative, because obviously when we were hunter-gatherers and whatever, we were designed to look out for danger constantly. So we've kind of still got that as an evolutionary trait. You can get 1 million nice comments, but the one negative comment's going to stick with you because we're designed that way. So I think, again, I don't like when people get hate comments and that kind of thing. You've got criticism, and that's great because, again, we can learn and evolve. But when it comes to just posting negative comments and making fun of people's looks and whatever it is, that makes me feel a bit sad because I want everyone to come together and be kind to one another. So I think that's the hard thing, which is why, again, it comes down to having a deep sense of self-love. Because when you've got self-love, right, Max, you don't hate on other people because you're so focused on yourself and you're a happy, positive person. And second of all, on the other side, you don't let those negative comments affect you. Do you know what I mean? So, but to answer your question, overall positive because we awareness and everyone's come together and you feel less alone in a way because people are going through similar situations, and you can kind of connect with people online. Does that answer the question?
No, that absolutely does. And what I think is
Okay.
interesting there is I think I've watched you in real time work out what you think about that, which I quite like.
Oh.
No, that's absolutely that makes sense because obviously if you're facing like questions like this, which are obviously huge questions, and I think this does like again link to social media and people online, is I think that what's really good about podcasts and long form content and radio content sometimes is it's able to take a more nuanced position than a TikTok or a tweet, which I think really has led to a much more polarized society. So that's something that if I was gonna kind of comment on this, I would say definitely that I think the rise of social media amongst Generation Z has led to a much more polarized society politically, and not just politically, but just in terms of how people interact with one another. Is it's either, oh, I like that person or I hate that person. It's I agree and everything they say is right, or I disagree and everything they say is wrong. And you don't have that kind of moment where you weigh up everything, weigh up all the information that you have. You're nodding a lot.
No, I completely agree with what you just said. Completely. I think I completely agree. I'm very much a person where I agree with some people on the left, some people on the right, whatever it is, but I like to hear both perspectives with an open, I've always been an open-minded person, which is why even on my TikTok, for example, I had a guest who was a meat eater and veganism has changed her life completely, and she's a big advocate for it. And I've also had a guest where they kind of went from veganism back to meat eating and don't like veganism at all. And I've always, because I'm an open-minded person, I can have discussions with both and not hate one or the other just because I disagree with their opinion. And I completely agree with the polarized part. I can't believe I didn't even think about that myself. It's completely true. And I talk about this all the time where you either, oh my God, you like this person, but they said and I was like, of course, I don't agree with that part that they said, but I really like this part that they said. You know, you've got a lot of controversial figures like Candace Owens or Donald Trump or all these people. And yes, some things that people have said I disagree with, but there's a lot of things I agree with. And doesn't mean just because I really didn't like that they said this, I should hate them for eternity and they're a horrible person. And no, I think you should have, like you said, look at both sides of everything and come to your own conclusion. And don't feel like you need to take a complete side, like you need to be far left or you need to be far right. You just weigh up both sides because there's lots of things I agree with on one side, but not the other, and vice versa. And I think there is this pressure to kind of pick a side, right? Like you said. And when you do pick that side, for example, it just invites hatred from the other side and hatreds towards the other side. So I completely agree with you. I think, which is why I kind of briefly touched on cancel culture and free speech, because that also, sorry to like go back to cancel culture, but that kind of cancel culture to me insinuates or kind of promotes people not being able to learn and change and grow. The girl that I was 10 years ago, I'm nothing like her now, whether it's views, whether it's personality. Do you know what I mean? So life is all about evolving and changing and growing. And, you know, maybe you agreed with something back then, but you don't anymore, but now you have gone back. That's what life's about. And I think it's kind of, you have to be in a certain box. And if you're not, you're cancelled, or I hate you, or whatever it is. I think we should all love each other and respect each other's opinions and be okay with disagreeing with someone, but then, you know, you can go to the pub after and have a chat like friends. It doesn't mean you don't have to be friends with the person. Do you know what I mean?
Absolutely.
So I think it's been, sorry to interrupt, but it's also been, I mean, I don't know if you saw my recent reel about Africa Brooke, and I'm actually currently reading her book, The Third Perspective, which I recommend to everybody. It's all about cancel culture, and she is a big advocate for, you know, speaking your mind in a kind manner, basically, and how, long story short, but she, I think just after 2020, I think January 2021, she wrote an open letter to the public saying why she's leaving the cult of wokeism. And she kind of gave a whole, speech about why, she found it quite intense. And when she felt a certain way inside, but she felt that she had to conform to society because otherwise she'd be cancelled. And she's written a book about how to kind of decide when and where to say certain things or whatever it is, but not hide your authentic self. But then not hate people because they have a different opinion, So I think, yeah, so that's one thing which social media kind of disagree. Like again, even with the whole social media Hailey Bieber thing, it's always choosing a side. Oh no, but I love Hailey. Oh no, so let's send hate to Selena. First of all, we don't know them. Second of all, if we do know the full story, why would we send hate to these women? Do you know what I mean? Yeah. And the polarized thing, yeah, completely agree.
100%. Sorry, I think I'm losing my voice. Excuse me.
No worries.
Yes, so I think I've got to the end of the list of questions. We've been chatting on for a good half an hour. I'm a bit upset that I'm going to have to cut down a bit of this because I'll not be able to use as much. If I find any more questions, I'll definitely get back in touch.
Yeah, that was really good. We can
I'm
have like a normal chat off camera if you want as well. That was really interesting.
100%, yeah. Yeah, so I think it's interesting that when you kind of put together the positives and negatives of social media and that kind of thing, I think obviously there's a lot of positives in what it allows you to do and kind of facilitating discourse. But I think the quality of it is maybe not as good as it was.
Right,
And
I see.
that's what's frustrating a little bit to me.
So like the quality of what? Sorry.
So if you're having again, I think a podcast or something long form is better than this, but you're able to hear a much more diverse range of views through
Right, yeah.
or anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
But I think the actual quality of the discourse isn't always as strong on social media as it would be if you were getting your media from another source. And I think that's perhaps the point that I'm getting at in some of this.
Yeah, I think
I think I'm working it out as I go along.
yeah, no, fair enough. I think I think podcasters get a little bit of hate as well because, we're not licensed or whatever it is, and which is why for me personally, I try to promote, a diverse kind of conversation. I try to. Um, and I'm happy to interview someone on the far left or the
Mm.
far right, whatever it is, with an open mind and, ask maybe devil's advocate kind of questions or whatever. But yeah, I completely agree with you. It is quite hard with the quality.
How do
I
you
do
go
agree.
about choosing your guests for the podcast?
So obviously, my genre is kind of self-improvement, whatever it is. So I do look along those lines, but it's usually people I've followed on social media, which is why, again, that's a great thing about social media is first of all, I've made friends through it because I've reached out to them and said, I love your content. I love, your content about self-love or what you've said about this situation or whatever it is. I'd love to invite you on. And then we kind of, sort it out. And through that, we've kind of carried on conversations off camera and then exchanging numbers and FaceTiming and meeting up, and it's just been a beautiful thing. I'm so grateful. Like one of my closest friends, Priya, I call her a sister from another mister. Like she's incredible, and I met her solely through this podcast situation thing that I'm doing. And yeah, when it comes to reaching out to people, I just kind of, it's usually if they come up on my TikTok for you page or whatever it is, and I think, oh my God, I love their content. I'd love to ask them about this or learn a bit more about how they got this mindset or whatever it is. So it's just a simple DM or an email. And yeah, I think that's also why it's been so great because it's quite an easy way to kind of
Yeah,
connect with people. Just a simple DM. Before, I don't know what it was like back in the day, but you'd have to go through an agent or whatever it is. And I wouldn't have been able to find them as easily as well.
you have to write something
And
better.
yeah, literally write a letter, send it in the mail, first class. You see the UK as such a small place. But you realize how many different people either think alike with you, and I don't know. It's just like I met a friend from Nottingham. Never been to Nottingham before, I don't think. But yeah, and we're really good friends, and we talk all the time, and yeah, really, really grateful.
No, that's because obviously I'm interested in because obviously I've done a bit of the side of picking out interviewees and finding out more about people and then kind of contacting them.
Yeah.
And it's always, I feel like it does reflect a lot about what you're trying to do with who you choose and who you consider interesting enough to get on. And I really like a real variety of people, because
Yeah.
obviously you don't want to get a load of people. Like, I mean, for this one that I'm putting together, which is about kind of how Gen Z has developed, it's interesting that you brought up cancel culture and kind of deplatforming, because one of the people I've spoken to is Claire Fox, who
Oh,
used to
wow.
be the Brexit Party MEP. And
Yeah.
she's not somebody that I would agree with politically, but I think she's really interesting.
Mm.
And the stuff that she said, and she's putting together this kind of academy of ideas, which is young people basically debating and discussing with each other um, issues that they might otherwise not discuss. And that's one thing that's interesting. But then other people on the other side, I mean, I was speaking to somebody from the Green Party as well. So it's kind of
Mm.
that I what I admire about the stuff that you make is obviously that you put out people from a really broad variety. And I think that that's what I try and do as well. So I like that.
Thank you so much. And it's so great that you've done that as well. So you've spoken to people on both sides with an open mind. And even though you don't agree with some things or agree, it doesn't mean you hate them afterwards. Do
No,
you know what I
because
mean?
they've got interesting things to say. And I mean, I didn't agree with everything that Claire Fox said, for instance.
Yeah.
Obviously, she's pushing the idea that Generation Z are snowflakes. And that was kind of, and I would hope that that's not true, and just in the sense that we've sat and discussed a lot of issues
Yeah.
that we disagree with, but I've not
Mm.
melted, and I've not kind of refused to talk about it.
Yeah, no, exactly. No, it's really nice. I think it would make for a kinder world, to be honest.
Absolutely.
Unless it's obviously extremely offensive and harmful and,
Yeah,
violent, then why not? Do you know what I mean?
why not? I think we're
Yeah.
about to get kicked off this Zoom. I've not paid for the upgrade, so I think I've
I'm the
only got
same. I always send this as multiple links to my guys.
I've got a few seconds left. I'm going to have to crack on after this as
Yeah,
well.
yeah, no
Thank you
worries.
so much for talking,
Thank you so much for inviting me.
and
It's been so fun.
I'll definitely make sure to send this over to you and the final product as well.
Yeah, thank you so much. Have a lovely rest of your day. Thank
Thank
you for
you so much
this.
for your time.
No worries. Thank you so much.
Bye bye.